Hi everyone, Mark here. I'm back for my third vlog, and today we're focusing on restrictive practices. And to help me answer some questions about restrictive practices, I have Evie Proeve here with us, who's going to answer some of my questions about what we're doing as an organisation, etc. So welcome Evie.
Thanks, Mark.
Today we're going to be exploring restrictive practices for a number of reasons. Firstly, so we really understand as an organisation what a restrictive practice is. And we want to do this so we provide the best possible services to our clients and their families. Also, we have some government changes to legislation around restrictive practices and how we implement them and report on them. And also, how we need to change as an organisation in terms of how we record restrictive practices and, I guess, reduce the amount of restrictive practice we have across the organisation. So Evie, can you explain what a restrictive practice is?
So a restrictive practice is a device or action that removes a person's freedom or interferes with their ability to make a decision or a choice. And there's lots of different sorts of restrictive practices. And we're currently making a toolkit about that to send out to clients and their families and carers, just to give a little bit more information about that.
How has legislation changed around restrictive practices, and how does that affect us as an organisation?
So the changes in legislation have required service providers, which is us, to reduce or eliminate the use of restrictive practices where possible when we deliver a service. And there's also new recording, reporting, consent and approval and review requirements for us as a service provider to ensure that the clients that we support are safe.
So Evie, why have these changes occurred?
So the research has shown the negative impacts of restrictive practices on the clients that are supported by an organisation. And there's been a lot of inconsistency in the past with restrictive practices across the sector. Particularly with how they're approved and reported, recorded and reviewed. So basically there's an over-reliance on them by service providers currently, and they're used as a way to manage behaviours of concern, so we want to move away from that.
So is it ever okay to use a restrictive practice?
Yes, it is. In certain situations it is okay to use a restrictive practice. But there are certain conditions and then certain processes following that which we have to adhere to. And before a restrictive practice is used, we must ensure that the least restrictive practice is used. It must be documented that all other options have been tried before we have used that restrictive practice. A risk assessment of the use of the restrictive practice must be conducted. An appropriate prescription, consent and endorsement must be obtained from a medical or health professional, the family or guardian and the person themselves. A positive behaviour support plan may be required as per the legislation, and the use of any ongoing restrictive practice must be reviewed every 6 months. The effects of the restrictive practice on other people must also be considered and minimised wherever possible.
So Evie, which restrictive practices are allowed to be used as long as we follow the procedures?
The restrictive practices that are allowed with the correct reporting, recording, approval and review processes are mechanical restraint, physical restraint, seclusion, chemical restraint, detention and environmental restraint.
Are there any restrictive practices that are never allowed to be used?
Yes. Some restrictive practices that are never allowed to be used under any circumstances are exclusion, aversive restraint or intervention, psychosocial restraint, prone physical restraint and supine physical restraint.
So if people don't really know what those things mean, where can they find some answers?
There'll be more information in the toolkit, and if you're still unsure, speak to your team leader or your regional manager and they'll be able to give you more info on that.
Excellent. What if an employee is asked to use a restrictive practice from a family member or a carer?
So if that happens, in the end, we are to follow legislation. It was created by the government and not by Community Living Australia, so we are obligated to follow the law. But if there's a restrictive practice that family members or carers are bringing forth as an idea, we can bring that to our team leaders and to our regional manager, and that approval process could then be gone through if it's appropriate, and then things could move on from there.
Excellent. And I guess it's about also helping the families understand how to reduce that restrictive practice over time too.
Yeah, absolutely. And there may be other strategies that are appropriate to use in place of a restrictive practice. So, Mark, what is Community Living Australia doing as an organisation to reduce or eliminate restrictive practices?
Hang on, Evie, you're not meant to ask me the questions. Look, that's a great question, and there's four main things that we're doing. Is we're reviewing as an organisation all the restrictive practices across the organisation and recording them and being aware of any restrictive practices that we have. We need to know this information. Number two, we're reviewing our processes and our policies around restrictive practices, and which we'll always do. We have to. Number three, we're setting up a committee that can look at supporting our teams to eliminate or reduce the amount of restrictive practices that we have across the organisation. And we also have, I guess, identifying someone that can take on a role, can't think of the name of the restricted practice officer, to support our team leaders and our managers to follow the right process.
What is our stance as an organisation in regards to restrictive practices?
Well, one thing I'm really passionate about is that we do the best we can for our clients. And if we have any restrictive practices in an organisation, unless they're absolutely necessary, we're not doing the best by our clients. So I think, as I said before, we need to identify the restrictive practices, reduce or eliminate wherever possible. So we have that dignity for our clients and the best service provision possible. I guess we need to follow the correct procedures. Again, I've said this before. So we record everything down, we review it, and we get the right permissions in place to ensure that we follow the right processes around our restricted practice, and we're all on the same page. It's really important. Everyone has to be on the same page. I guess our belief is any restricted practices is only temporary. So therefore it can reduce over time or be totally eliminated. And that's just through hard work and understanding of our clients and what their needs are and how they respond to different situations and also what they want. I guess we need to really be right behind this. It's something that we've driven as an organisation for a long time. We're one of the leaders in South Australia around coming up with process around restrictive practices, and we supported the government to come up with the right processes, which went national. So, we're at the forefront of this, and we want to continue to be at the forefront. And while we're doing this, it's about maintaining choice and control for our clients and providing the best to them. Thanks, Evie, and thank you for everyone who's watching. I hope you now have a better understanding of restrictive practices and the legislative changes that have occurred and how we're changing as an organisation. And I guess if you have any questions around restrictive practices, please ask your team leaders or regional managers. I'm sure they're happy to help you out where they can.